I remember the night like it just happened yesterday. We were standing in the kitchen, dim lights, the smell of takeout, still hanging in the air, and silence that felt louder than a scream. He looked at me, no emotion, no hesitation. Just those 5 words that carved a permanent scar into my spine. "You're lucky I tolerate you." I didn't even flinch. Not because it didn't hurt, but because it hurt so deeply. I went numb instantly. He went on as if it was some casual observation. "No one would ever want you. You're too much, too emotional, too difficult." I'm the only one who ever stuck around. The way he said it, like he was doing me a favor by existing next to me. I should have walked out right then, but I didn't. Ethan and I met at a product launch 3 years ago. He was the golden boy, sharp, confident, effortlessly charming. The kind of man that makes everyone else in the room disappear. I worked in PR at a tech firm. He was an engineer on a side project we'd just acquired. I pitched his team in front of a dozen executives. He caught my eye afterward and said, "You're better at this than most people pretending to be experts." Back then, I thought it was a compliment. It wasn't. It was a test. We started dating quickly. He brought me lunch, said he'd never met a woman who spoke like a CEO, but laughed like a poet, made me playlists, took me to jazz bars, memorized how I took my tea. And just like that, I fell. I fell hard. But then it began barely noticeable at first. It started with little things. He'd comment on what I wore to work. "Is that what you're going with? Looks a bit loud, doesn't it?" He'd raise an eyebrow if I posted something on LinkedIn. "Thought you didn't need to prove yourself online?" He even joked about my position. "PR is just lipstick on tech. You should try something real someday." Every time I questioned it, he'd brush it off with a smirk. "Relax, babe. Don't be so sensitive." But I was sensitive, because I was slowly being made small, on purpose. Looking back, I don't know the exact moment I stopped recognizing myself. It didn't happen all at once. It was slow erosion, like water carving out stone. I used to lead presentations without notes. Suddenly, I was second-guessing bullet points. I used to mentor juniors. Now I was shrinking in meetings, afraid to sound too ambitious. He called it grounding. I now know it was control. The night he told me no one else would want me. That was after a networking gala. He got upset because I laughed too loud at a joke another executive made. He said it made him look weak. I told him I was tired of being criticized for existing, that I missed feeling like someone's partner instead of their project. He didn't yell, didn't curse. He just looked me in the eye and said, "It's your lucky I tolerate you. No one else would." And then he opened his phone and started scrolling like he hadn't just detonated a bomb. I stood there, hands shaking, mind racing, and all I could think was, how did I get here? That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake beside a man who just emotionally gutted me and didn't care. And something snapped. Not in a dramatic, storm out of the house kind of way. Just quietly, like a switch. The next morning, I got up earlier than usual, packed a small bag, called in sick, walked out of the apartment, no tears, no goodbye. I didn't even leave a note, because there was nothing left to explain to someone who decided I wasn't worth wanting. I wish I could say I felt strong, that I left with fire in my chest and clarity in my heart, but I didn't. I left with fear, with shame, with doubt that maybe, just maybe, he was right. Maybe no one else would want me. I didn't know it then, but what I really needed wasn't to be wanted. I needed to want myself again. And that was going to take time, but I didn't realize Ethan wasn't done with me yet. I walked away, but he wasn't done with me yet. At first, I thought I'd finally gotten out. I wasn't looking for revenge or closure. I just wanted peace. A blank page, 2 weeks of paid. I'll leave a couch to sleep on at my cousin's apartment and a head full of noise I was too tired to unpack. No posts, no announcement, no shared friends involved. I left with nothing, said nothing. But men like Ethan don't like to be left quietly. It started as whispers. A former coworker, Sarah, texted me 3 days after I disappeared from the office. "Are you okay? I don't want to pry, but there are rumors." And they're not kind. I asked what she meant. She hesitated, then forwarded a screenshot from a Slack thread. one of the private ones. Ethan had added a few guys from his team, plus one of the junior HR associates. He said I'd had emotional outbursts, claimed I'd gone through something mental, said I had a pattern of making up issues to avoid accountability. One of them replied, "Explains the crying in the ladies' room last quarter." And another always knew she was unstable. Pretty face, though. I read the thread 5 times heart racing. The crying. That one time months ago, after Ethan belittled my pitch in front of a full boardroom, saying my campaign was cute but not serious. I hadn't said anything then. I just excused myself quietly and cried where no one could hear me. Apparently someone had. And now they were using it as proof I was unfit, dramatic, dangerous. Within a week, I noticed things shifting without a single official word. One of the startup clients I'd worked on suddenly pulled back from a deal. A product launch I'd prepped for months was handed to someone else. When I called to ask, my old manager said, "There's concern, about how things ended between you and Ethan." I hadn't even mentioned his name, but he'd made sure mine was dirty enough to stick to his. The worst part, no one outright accused me. No one said we believe him over you. They just avoided me. I became a reputation risk, a walking liability, the girl who cracked, the girl who made things messy. I thought about fighting back, filing a report, gathering emails, timestamps, witnesses. But what would I say? He made people feel sorry for him by pretending I was unstable. He spread rumors and weaponized my silence. It would sound petty. Worse, it would sound emotional. And Ethan had already made sure that word stuck to me like static. So I did the only thing I could. I left, formally, quietly. I sent HR a short email thanking them for the opportunity and didn't explain why I wouldn't be returning. No rage, no details, just 5 lines of polite surrender. It felt like losing a war I hadn't even realized I was fighting. And walking away didn't feel strong anymore. It felt like defeat. For weeks, I stayed off LinkedIn, deleted Instagram. I didn't want to know what people thought. I didn't want to give Ethan the satisfaction of watching me spiral. But there's something about hitting bottom that's clarifying. When you have no reputation left to defend, you're free to build something new. And this time, it would be mine alone. I started small. A free webinar on crisis communication, then a certification course on digital brand repair. Then came the blog anonymous at first, just stories, quiet, blunt, real. I wrote about women being labeled difficult for setting boundaries, about how men like Ethan don't break you with fists but with doubt, about how we blame ourselves for being too emotional, when all we did was feel in a place designed to punish that. No names, no bitterness, just truth. And the truth, it resonated. A few posts went semi-viral. Emails trickled in, some from strangers, some from women I used to work with who never dared speak up. Your writing made me feel seen. I thought it was just me. You're saying what so many of us are too afraid to. It didn't fix anything overnight, but it made me feel solid again. Like maybe I hadn't imagined it all. 2 months later, I got an invitation to an industry networking dinner. Small private 10 people, no press, no glam, just conversation. I almost declined. But I went because hiding felt too much like letting him win. That's when I met Thomas. He was tall, understated calm, and that way men rarely are unless they've truly seen something fall apart. He didn't talk like a CEO. He asked questions, listened, really listened. We sat at the same end of the table and got into a conversation about corporate ethics, image rehabilitation, and what power shouldn't look like. I told him vaguely that I'd left a toxic work environment and was starting over as a freelancer. He didn't press, he just nodded and said, "Sometimes walking away isn't weakness. It's the first smart move." I didn't know it then, but that quiet, thoughtful man sipping bourbon across the table from me would soon become the very person Ethan called Sir. Sometimes the universe doesn't need your help. It just waits. A few days after that dinner, Thomas messaged me, not in a flirty way, not with emojis or compliments, just a simple note. "If you are ever free for dinner, I'd love to continue our conversation. No agenda, just 2 people trying to make sense of the mess." And maybe it was the way he worded it. Maybe it was the fact that he didn't try to fix me or fish for trauma. But I said yes. We met at a small French place downtown. Nothing fancy, just warm lighting, old jazz playing faintly in the background, and a bottle of wine neither of us could pronounce. He wasn't nervous, he didn't overtalk. He asked real questions. What's something no one ever bothered to understand about you? What would you do if your work wasn't tied to your survival? I surprised myself by answering honestly. And for once, I wasn't shrinking, I wasn't performing, I wasn't defending my worth in carefully rehearsed sentences. I was just present. It felt so unfamiliar, I almost didn't trust it. He told me he had recently left a high-pressure role after a major ethics dispute. No details, just that he'd chosen integrity over comfort. I told him I'd been publicly invisible, but privately rebuilding, that I used to lady strategy, and now I ghost wrote for clients too scared to say what they really thought. He laughed softly. It's always the ones who walk away who end up shaping the next big thing. I smiled, and for the first time in a long time, I meant it. When the check came, he didn't insist on paying or turn it into a weird power thing. He just said, "Let me buy you this one. It's the least I can do for all that insight." And when he walked me to my car, there were no awkward pauses, no pretending. He didn't ask to come up, didn't linger for a kiss like it was expected. He just looked at me steady, certain, and said, "You've got fire under all that silence. Don't let the wrong people smother it again." I drove home, feeling something I hadn't felt in months seen, but not picked apart. 2 days later, I opened LinkedIn. Not to post, just to scroll, mindlessly, maybe update my freelance profile. That's when I saw the announcement. Simple, corporate, harmless. We're thrilled to welcome Thomas Caldwell as the new Chief Operating Officer of Virion Technologies. I stared at the screen for almost a minute, then read it again. Thomas. Dinner? Thomas. The man who asked me about, meaning not metrics. He was now the new COO of the very company I had walked away from. The company where Ethan still worked. I didn't know whether to laugh or panic. For a second, I thought, should I tell him? Should I warn him about Ethan? About the whispers, the group chats, the emotional sabotage. But then I remembered the look on Thomas's face when I told him I left because of quiet cruelty. He already knew what that looked like. I didn't need to warn him. I didn't say anything, not even a congratulatory message. I just sat with the moment. Because some part of me knew I didn't have to expose Ethan. He was about to do it to himself. In the days that followed, I watched from afar. No posts from Ethan, no likes, no comments, no shared celebrations on Thomas's arrival. He always bragged about being close with executives, always posted photos from happy hours strategy, off-sites, company, family moments. But now radio silence. It made me wonder, had he already noticed the shift? Maybe he felt it in the way people stopped laughing at his jokes, or how certain projects didn't land on his desk anymore. Maybe, just maybe, he sensed the walls quietly closing in. But that was none of my business anymore. What was my business was the unexpected calm that came from knowing I didn't have to destroy him. All I had to do was become someone he couldn't reach anymore, and let life do the rest. I wasn't planning to ever step foot back into Virion. I had left that building with my dignity barely intact, and I had promised myself once was enough. But then came the email, not from HR, not from anyone in my old department. It was from Thomas, short, direct. "We're restructuring the Cortex campaign. I'd like to bring you in as an external strategist. Freelance, you'd report directly to me." For a moment I froze. It wasn't just any campaign. Cortex was Ethan's crown jewel, the very project he'd once called too complex for soft skills like PR. I read the email again. Thomas wasn't asking me back as a favor. He was hiring me as an expert. I said yes, not to get revenge, not even to prove anything. I said yes because I was finally ready to take back the part of me I left behind, the part that used to walk into boardrooms without flinching. The onboarding was clinical, clean, no drama. I signed NDAs, submitted strategy decks, got assigned a temporary badge. And just like that, I was in again, not as an employee, as a contractor, not under Ethan's control, but well within his line of sight. The first day I stepped back into the building, I felt every stare. Some looked confused, others looked amused. But the one face I was waiting for didn't show up. Ethan wasn't in that meeting. His name was on none of the memos. His logins were listed as pending transfer. I kept my head down. I did the work, quietly, efficiently. 2 days later, I saw him. Elevator, 8th floor, door opened. There he was. He blinked like he'd seen a ghost. "You're back?" I smiled. "Not really, just here to clean up a mess." He didn't answer. He couldn't. A week in, I got a meeting request review day with the executive team. I presented the new PR framework pivot plan and risk matrix for the Cortex launch. Everyone nodded. Everyone except Ethan, who wasn't even in the room anymore. He was being phased out. Not loudly, not cruelly, just irreversibly. The next day, Thomas and I passed in the hallway. We didn't stop. We didn't speak. He just looked at me, and I understood this was never about revenge. This was about repair, strategic, intentional, deserved. But not everyone saw it that way. Because 2 days later, HR received an anonymous report. It accused Thomas of professional misconduct, of hiring me based on a personal relationship, of favoritism, of conflict of interest. It was desperate, transparent, pathetic. And it was Ethan. Even without his name on it, I knew. He couldn't stand the silence anymore. So he did what men like him do best. He tried to weaponize the system he once used to protect himself. But what he didn't realize was he was finally filing a complaint inside a company run by someone who had already seen through him. When manipulators run out of power, they turn to paperwork. I knew it wouldn't end quietly. Men like Ethan don't just walk away from lost ground. They throw one last match before they leave, hoping anything catches fire. And this time, the fire came in the form of a formal HR complaint. It was anonymous. Of course it was. But everyone knew who had written it. It accused Thomas of inappropriate favoritism, claimed I had been hired not for merit, but for personal involvement. It hinted at power dynamics, unprofessional conduct, and even used the word affair. There were no specifics, no evidence, but it didn't need truth, it only needed noise. For a brief moment, I felt that old panic return, the same panic I'd felt the first time Ethan twisted my silence into instability. But this time I wasn't alone, and this time I wasn't quiet. Thomas called me before I even heard from HR, just a heads up. You're about to be looped in. His voice was calm, almost amused. They want to talk about ethics. Should be interesting. I asked him if he was okay. He said without missing a beat, I've got nothing to hide. I do, however, have a folder full of documented sabotage attempts. Want to bet who ends up under review? HR scheduled a meeting with me 2 days later. I came prepared. The contract that stated my freelance scope, emails outlining project goals, weekly reports and client feedback, all clean, all professional. I didn't bring emotion, I brought documentation, and I didn't defend myself. I clarified. That was enough. A week passed, no word. Then one afternoon, I received an internal memo. It was brief. Effective immediately, Ethan Reed has been placed under administrative review, pending investigation into multiple incidents of professional misconduct. There it was, not loud, not dramatic, just decisive. Later, I learned more. Turns out the complaint Ethan filed opened a door he didn't expect. HR had to investigate both sides, so they did. And in doing so, they found multiple Slack messages demeaning coworkers, tampering with project documentation to inflate success metrics, a pattern of undermining female colleagues, including me. They even recovered emails he thought were deleted. One thread included a line he'd written to another engineer right after I left the company. She'll fade out. Girls like that always do. But I didn't fade. I just got quiet. And sometimes silence isn't surrender. Sometimes it's strategy. When news spread about Ethan's suspension, no one celebrated. There was no applause, no loud victory, just a long, tired exhale across the floor, as if a weight had been lifted from people who didn't even know how heavy it was until it was gone. Thomas never gloated. He didn't talk about the complaint publicly, didn't make statements, didn't even mention Ethan's name again. He just kept showing up, doing the work, leading without fear. And I kept submitting deliverables, kept receiving referrals, kept building something outside the walls that once tried to bury me. There's something incredibly satisfying about watching a man try to weaponize the rules and realizing too late he's not the one holding the rulebook anymore. He lost the room, so he turned to the internet. I should have known he wouldn't go quietly. The system didn't work for him anymore, so now he was going to find a different arena. And in today's world, when power fades in private, people reach for public noise. It started subtly. A tweet. Not from Ethan's account, he was smarter than that, but from a faceless handle with a small following. It said, "Funny how some PR women sleep their way into strategy rooms." No names, no tags, but I knew. So did anyone who'd been watching closely. 2 days later, a blog post appeared on a fringe tech gossip site. The headline, "When Professional Becomes Personal, Inside the Conflict Scandal at Virion." It was poorly written, overly dramatic, but it listed just enough breadcrumb details for people to connect, the dots half-truths tied together with toxic implication. A freelancer with a past connection, a recent internal shakeup. Insiders claiming an affair drove out a team lead. It was vague enough to avoid legal consequences, but specific enough to make me feel like my career had a target on its back. I expected to panic, but I didn't, because this time I'd seen it coming. Back when I first re-entered Virion, I'd hired a reputation management consultant, a quiet genius in the crisis PR world. We'd spent weeks preparing for this exact possibility. Because when someone like Ethan starts losing power, they don't admit defeat. They reframe the story. We launched a counter-narrative before the noise even reached critical mass. No press release, no drama, just a few well-placed articles from trusted voices in the industry. How clean governance and external audit saved Virion's Cortex project. Women in crisis strategy. The rise of quiet operators. Why silence doesn't equal guilt. A look into PR. Ethics. They weren't about me directly, but anyone who mattered could read between the lines. We also prepped former clients and colleagues with simple language. If they were approached, I worked with her. Always professional. Any rumor saying otherwise is just noise. And it worked. Because the thing about smear campaigns is they only work when people are still unsure about who you are. I wasn't a mystery anymore. I had a record, a reputation, results. Still, it stung. Watching people speculate, seeing my name appear in places it didn't belong. I spent nights staring at my phone fingers, hovering over a statement I never posted. But I remembered something Thomas once said long before. All of this power isn't how loud you speak. It's how well you're still heard when you say nothing at all. And so I didn't explain myself. I didn't call Ethan out, didn't repost the articles, didn't even block the trolls. I just kept going. Because here's the truth. A lie needs oxygen. But truth can wait. 1 week after the blog post, the site took it down. Why? Because Thomas's legal team didn't play around. And the author, let's just say, his anonymous source was traced back to an email that had once belonged to Ethan's college pseudonym. It was sloppy, desperate, predictable. That was the final nail. Not in Ethan's career that had already bled out. In his credibility, because now even the ones who used to whisper his praises, they weren't whispering anymore. They were distancing, fast. The last time I saw Ethan was at a networking event for former Virion partners. I was a guest speaker. He was in the back row. When I finished my panel, I walked off stage, took a sip of water, and turned, and for a split second, our eyes met. He didn't look angry. He looked exhausted, like a man who had finally run out of moves. And maybe in some twisted way, he realized something, that I had never ruined him. He'd just spent too long trying to ruin someone who'd already outgrown his reach. You don't have to bury them. Just build high enough that they can't reach. I didn't want to be known for what happened. I didn't want my name tied to a man I had outgrown or a company I no longer belonged to. What I wanted was my own table, not a seat at theirs, not an invitation, a table I built from scratch. With steel they tried to break in me. It started small. I took on more freelance clients, women-led startups, solo founders, trying to navigate chaotic markets and chaotic headlines. I didn't just give them PR, I gave them armor. We didn't sell perfect stories. We told the truth strategically. The kind of truth that made investors nod and competitors sweat. One client turned into two, two turned into six. By the end of that year, I had turned a one-woman consultancy into a boutique strategy agency with a 6-month wait list, no big announcement, no flashy rebrand, just quiet wins stacking on top of each other. And then came the real pivot. A friend of a friend, someone who had watched the Ethan fallout from a distance, called me. There's a group of former execs and operators building something new. They need someone who doesn't flinch under pressure. I met with them. They were building a venture studio focused on founders recovering from public collapse ones who'd been canceled unfairly or smeared by partners, people like me. They didn't want a fixer. They wanted someone who understood what it felt like to have your name dragged and still show up the next morning. I joined as partner, equity, autonomy, full control of narrative strategy. And just like that, I wasn't just helping clients clean up messes. I was shaping the next generation of voices, Thomas and I. We never made it a storybook romance. There were no declarations, no fairy tale endings. But we stayed connected. Quiet dinners, hard conversations, mutual respect. He once said, "You never needed my title. Just a mirror clear enough to remind you who you already were." That meant more than any job offer ever could. I don't talk about Ethan now. Not in interviews, not in speeches. If people mention him, I change the subject, not out of fear, out of irrelevance. He's not a chapter, he's just a footnote. And I've written so many pages since. The irony. The same sentence he once used to break me. No one would ever want you has become the fuel for every woman who's ever been told the same thing. It's printed anonymously on the back of our agency's business cards. A quiet reminder, a quiet burn. I didn't win because I fought. I won because I stopped needing to. I used to think justice meant hearing "I'm sorry," that it came in the form of public apologies or private shame or watching the people who hurt you fall apart in front of you. But real justice is quieter than that. It's waking up one morning and realizing you no longer feel small. No longer rehearse what you'd say to them if you had the chance. No longer carry the weight of trying to undo what they made you believe about yourself. I don't flinch when I hear his name anymore. I don't look over my shoulder in meetings. He's not in the room. But more importantly, he's not in my head. I've built a life that feels like mine now. One where I take days off without guilt. Where I pick my clients, pick my schedule, and most importantly, pick my peace. There's a strength that comes with no longer needing to prove your strength. A calm that isn't performative. A confidence that doesn't post itself online every 5 seconds. Sometimes I get messages from women I'll never meet, from people who've read my words and seen their own scars reflected back. They tell me things like, "I thought I was the only one. Thank you for putting it into words. I left and I didn't go back." And that matters more than anything Ethan could have said or done. Because I don't want revenge anymore. I want circles that heal, not cycles that repeat. There's a quote I read once: "Forgiveness is giving up the hope that the past could have been any different." I think about that often. Not because I've forgiven Ethan, but because I've finally forgiven myself for staying too long, for believing him, for shrinking to make him comfortable. I never needed to ruin him. He did that part himself. All I had to do was refuse to stay ruined with him. Now I speak less, but when I do, people listen. I walk into rooms I used to feel lucky just to enter. Now I take up space, and I know I deserve it. I sign contracts, I build brands, I mentor women who were once in the exact place. I stood years ago thinking it was their fault someone else couldn't handle their fire, and I tell them with no drama, no revenge fantasy, just truth. You don't need them to want you. You need to want yourself more than you fear being alone. The first time I said that, I felt something lift, like the last piece of him fell off me, like I no longer needed his voice to define mine. So no, Ethan never apologized. He probably never will. And that's okay, because the life I've built, the peace I wake up with every day, that's the apology. And it was always mine to give, to myself.